welcome to Inclusion Influencers, brought to you by the National Alliance for Accessible Golf. I'm Dave Barton, Executive Director of the Alliance. We hope these conversations that we have with people and organizations make a difference in the lives of others and help educate or inform you and perhaps inspire you to learn more and get yourself and others involved. Golf is truly a game for all abilities. Joining me today is Andy Stevenson, a highly respected radio and television producer, broadcaster, play-by-play guy, and more for over 20 years, who accepted my challenge at the 2025 U.S. Adaptive Open in Maryland to be the interviewee today versus the interviewer. It's safe to say one of us in this conversation is in their natural environment. Andy, welcome to the show. What part of the world are you in today?
Well, hi, Dave. Thanks very much for having me. I'm excited to chat to you. And I'm at home. I live near Windsor in England. And I know I've even just been in town now, and I know for a fact that lots of Americans visit Windsor because it's part of the tourist trail. If you're going to London, then you inevitably have a day or so in Windsor to see the castle and try and see any members of the royal family that you can. So I'm sure anyone who's been to England will know where I am.
Yeah, like I said, the closest I've come to that right now is my wife and I have become pretty good fans of BritBox. The television's pretty good over there, so we're big time subscribers now. So we're getting a little bit of taste of that, but that's fantastic. Of course, I did a little bit of research, and there's plenty of information out there about you and your amazing career. So I'm just going to tee up your biography a little bit, and we can go from there. So, from what I could learn while studying English and American literature at Warwick, you became involved with the school sports program on student radio, and it looks like your experiences there helped solidify your path towards a career in radio or television. You continue with your postgraduate work in broadcast journalism at Cardiff, where you began working with BBC Radio Berkshire. That might be Berkshire, depending on what part of the world you come from, via work experience program around 2004. So I guess, I'm curious, was the seed planted really early as a child related to a career in radio or TV? And, or what pushed you towards the student radio show in the beginning that kind of got you going down this path?
Well, you mentioned I studied English and American literature. I do want to say a quick thank you to America and American authors because you got me through my university degree. Because you can imagine that the English side of things is all like Shakespeare and Chaucer and 1700s, 1800s, and the American stuff was modern and 1900s and The Great Gatsby and On the Road and great books like that. So thank you for that because you got me through my studies. I think I would have given up were it not for the American literature. But yeah, to answer your question, I mean, listen, I think we'll get into this a bit later on, but I mean, I was born with no hands. I have short arms and I wear a prosthetic leg as well because my left leg comes down to knee level. So I was born like that. But growing up as a kid, I wanted to run around and play sport as much as anyone else. Even just playing soccer in the garden with my dad or my mates down the park or whatever. But I kind of got to a point in my teenage years where I realized that I could play these sports for fun, but I probably wouldn't become, a Premier League or England international soccer player or, the Paralympics was something that wasn't quite as big back then when I was a child. I think if I was a child now, the Paralympics would be something that might be on my radar, but back then it wasn't really. So I was thinking of ways to stay involved in sport without being a sports person myself. And that in combination with the fact that at school and through university, I was always a words person. I was much better with letters and words than I was with numbers. I was always quite a good writer. Journalism then became the thing I focused on. So yeah, from a pretty early age, I'd say maybe 12, 13, 14 years of age, I wanted to be a sports reporter in newspapers. And the thing that set me off on a slightly different path was, as you mentioned, when I went to university, I got involved in the student radio station. I can't actually remember what made me sign up, but I did. I signed up, and within a few months, I was presenting sports programs on that station, and it was brilliant. It was great fun. It was completely risk-free. We weren't really broadcasting to many people whatsoever, which meant you could make mistakes. You could be, you could just have fun with it really and relax. And so that was a key moment in my life. So that would have been around kind of 18, 19 years of age. I thought, okay, I want to be a sports reporter now on radio or television.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I took a look at some of the earlier stuff you've done and are continuing to do. So let's elaborate a little bit on that because we're definitely going to into the golf more specifically here in a moment. But I think your background and what you do right now, which has you certainly heavily involved with the Adaptive Open now, some of these things, it all kind of charts and moves that direction a little bit. So I just want to understand a little bit more about that kind of the earlier years once you're in the career, professional career, post school. You did some documentaries. You might have done a documentary on Seve Ballesteros, which I'm going to have to go see now, I'm pretty sure. You're a football reporter, which of course means soccer, I think, to most people over here. But of course, I want to try to stay with a proper vernacular this morning. And I'm going to stay away from any British Open versus Open Championship discussions. So tell me a little bit about that. I mean, I know, you've been doing BBC radio interviews and the NBC TV with Paralympics and BBC TV for the Paris Olympics as well. Excuse me, Paris Paralympics and Olympics. So help me understand that better because you seem to be doing a lot of stuff in a lot of different sports.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my main answer to that is I've just been very lucky, and I think in this industry, it's a lot about being in the right place at the right time. I think you mentioned at the start there that I began in what we would call local radio. I mean, I think it's the same in the States, but you're talking, we were broadcasting to a county which would have been, I guess, smaller than a state. I know you have counties as well, but I was working at a local station, and involved in coverage of like the local soccer team, but also we actually we had an ice hockey team, and there was horse racing, and there was one or two other things going on in the region. So that was a good kind of start point because, again, a little bit similar to the student radio, um, you you were able to kind of get involved in lots of stuff and see what you enjoyed, see what you were good at, both on air and off air, I should say. So I was producing kind of programs. I was reading sports bulletins. One of my jobs actually for a couple of years was when the soccer match was on, I would be the guy reading out the text messages. I mean, this puts a date on it because this is like 2006. So people have barely got mobile phones at this stage. It was early days of sending in an actual text message. Um, and I got reasonably well known in the local area because of that. I then applied for, so that was I have to say that was BBC, but it was BBC local. So I then applied for a job in television production, working on a TV show that I'd always wanted to work on. I'd watched it as a kid growing up. It was a kind of annual review of the sporting year on BBC One TV, and I got that job at what we would call kind of an entry level job. I was a researcher, um, but because the program was so massive, the work you were doing was actually very significant, and I was mixing with sports stars from different sports, and it was a real eye opener. It was the dream job. At that period of time, I was really living the dream because that was, as I say, a program I'd watched as a child, and to now be involved in putting it together and making it work was brilliant. The documentaries, yeah, I mean, I had an incredible boss, a lady called Jo McCusker, who was considered, she was the BBC's golf editor at the time. And so she developed brilliant relationships with players and caddies and officials. And she'd struck up quite a relationship with Seve. And so first of all, when he was ill, and then subsequently when he died, she made two incredible programs. I think you might be familiar with Ken Brown, who's one of the
Mhm.
BBC golf reporters. He went out and met Seve when he was ill, spent time with him at his house, and then when he died, we put together an obituary program, which, as you can imagine, featured everybody really. And yeah, again, very lucky to work on that behind the scenes. And I guess all of the time, I would be there would be a bit of me that was thinking, right, I want to continue doing this. I love this, but actually, I do want to be featuring on camera as well. Not because of any ego. I wasn't sort of, in any sense, kind of being a diva or demanding to be on TV. There was just this ambition in the back of my mind that one day I want to be doing what Ken Brown does or Peter Alice does or Jim Nance. We see the masters over here. and I've always been a bit geeky about sports commentators and sports presenters. And the minute I heard Jim Nance's voice, I was like, wow. And then, I read up on him and read about all the Super Bowls he'd commentated on and all the Masters he'd commentated on at Augusta. And it was that kind of, other people of my age were looking at the sports people as their heroes. I was looking and listening to the commentators, really.
Yeah, that's. I was going to ask you that question. You answered. I was kind of curious, because it's not my area of expertise at all. I think I had a very brief job. Well, I know I did, coming out of high school, early years of college, just part time at a radio station. And my I don't know how I don't even remember how I even got the job, but it was a job, And so my responsibility every hour during St. Louis Cardinals baseball games was to announce the name of the radio station to do
Yeah,
that. And I
yeah,
and I realized, with my hillbilly accent, I probably did not have a career in this particular field, which you're seeing very clearly now. Why I don't do this as a profession, and you do. But It's really interesting because I know that even if you're the face of the show, whatever that may be, you're still super heavily involved on the back end. I mean, you have to be intimately familiar with all the production stuff that's going on because in the end, you represent all that work that's been going on, and so it's pretty.
yeah, yeah. Well, actually, one of the things that attracted me to radio and TV was that sense of it is a real team effort. It's like a sports team. The runner or the researcher at the bottom level of the jobs is as important as the exec producer or the presenter. Everybody needs to play their part, and that's one of the things I really loved. And it's actually one of the things I always have in my mind now. When I am the person on camera, I am aware of. I think it's made me a better reporter because actually I'm aware of what everybody else is doing, from camera operator to producer to blah 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 blah. Even drivers and things. Everybody is contributing the same level of effort.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, we're going to start sliding into golf a little bit here now because this is, I guess, kind of technically a little bit of a golf show. Uh, you've become somewhat of the face of adaptive golf, or the face for adaptive golf, because of your coverage with the Adaptive Open. Even though you've been doing golf before, certainly it's got a different kind of attention, I think, over here, especially over in the States. I'm sure it's the same way over in Europe. And the Golf Channel coverage of the Adaptive Open is remarkable, in large part due to your experience in broadcasting and what you bring to the table with your knowledge of the sport and the competitors, your background. All these things just add a tremendous amount of watchability to what y'all are putting out. You've certainly been involved with the G4D Open in Britain, with the RNA and Sky TV. And as we talked about, you're doing football as well for the BBC, and also involved in some tennis with a term that most people know over here as well, Wimbledon, and some of the wheelchair finals with that. So I guess, it's a fantastic career at this point. Did you ever think you would be the face of anything?
No, I mean, I know people aren't seeing this video, but you can see that I'm probably blushing a bit because I feel almost a bit embarrassed by that. I hadn't really considered it that way, but I must admit, when I go to the US Adaptive Open, I'm welcomed so warmly and treated so nicely by everyone there. And I interestingly, last summer when I did the Adaptive Open in Kansas, and then a week later I worked at the Open Championship at Royal Troon. Some of the American players who I interviewed for my job at Troon for BBC Radio started or broke the ice by saying, forgive my accent, but kind of like, "Hey man, I saw you on the Adaptive last week on the Golf Channel," and it was yet another example to me of, wow, this is big out there, and the first Adaptive Open I did at Pinehurst. So I wasn't involved in the very first year. So my first Adaptive Open was 2023 at Pinehurst, and I'd never been to Pinehurst. And just a dream trip. It was absolutely incredible experience, and what I hadn't um, prepared for was the fact that every single television set across Pinehurst is on the Golf Channel, in the hotels, in the bars, everywhere. And so people were approaching me in the street. I mean, there was what do you call it? We would call it a stag party. There was a A
Bachelor.
bachelor party. Got off. We were in a brewery having a drink and a bite to eat, and this bachelor party gets off this minibus. About 10 guys in their 20s, and they were all like, wow, it's the guy from the Adaptive Open. They'd just been watching it in the clubhouse or in the hotel or wherever, and I'd never experienced that before. A lot of my work, certainly then, but still now, a lot of my work had been radio. That Adaptive Open at Pinehurst was one of my first big TV gigs, if you like. And yeah, it was incredible. But I think also you ask if I ever would have anticipated being the face of adaptive golf. I suppose when I started out doing this, I wouldn't have even been aware of adaptive golf, full stop, let alone television coverage of it. I would have known, of course, that there would be disabled people out there playing golf, but I wouldn't have, and I think I'd be right in saying, 20 years ago, I don't think there was any kind of, formal tour or championships, maybe at a local level, but certainly not, international. Um, so yeah, again, it's about being in the right place at the right time, isn't it? I am around at a time where suddenly there are not quite professional as such. We'll get onto that, but there are big tournaments. I would describe the Adaptive Open as a major tournament for disabled golfers, and I happen to be around um, to to present them. So yeah, it's fortunate timing, and obviously I hope it goes on a long time for me, but also I hope when I'm not doing this anymore, I hope the tournament's still going, and I hope somebody else is presenting it, and I hope it carries on for generations. It's brilliant, as you say, the Adaptive Open, the G4D Open in England. They've both been fantastic things, not just for me, but for everybody involved.
Yeah, it's to your point, and I've said this before, you know, individual disabilities playing golf is not a new thing. I mean, you can find old black and white footage from the 30s of a one-armed golfer who was traveling. We used to call that kind of barnstorming, where you're traveling around, just kind of making money, doing your thing, doing trick shots, hitting regular golf shots, whatever that may be. And I think National Amputee Golf Association came about here in America, at least right after World War II. But some of the one-armed golf associations were around almost 100 years ago. I mean, it is not, they've been around for a while, but, with the way information, which is, in your field, for sure, the way information moves now and as quickly as it moves, and with social media and things like that, it's just highlighting a different part of the game that's kind of always been there. Certainly, there's a range of types of disabilities that can, alter the way someone would play golf. Visually speaking, let's face it, the seated golfer community or someone that's got a very obvious prosthetic leg or prosthetic arm, that's what people see. But a lot of folks don't think about the other individuals with disabilities, that are out there as well. I mean, most people do, but the reality, whether it's, intellectual, cognitive, some of these things like Down syndrome, these folks have been playing at your golf course for a long time. You just might not have caught it and noticed it. So we're trying to encourage owners and operators to, you know, hey, it's here, it's been here. Just we're asking you to get a little more versed in how you handle what's a growing segment of golfers, especially I think more so now as far as growth goes with golfers that might have some sort of mobility impairment because prosthetics have got so much better seated golfers. So now golfers that might not have hands, are able to perhaps hold on to a club or use a club in a unique way, which we'll talk about your swing here in a little while. So it's pretty cool. And I think your perspective growing up as a child, with a disability and what you had to, learn to do or to deal with society kind of growing up probably gives you an amazing perspective, which I can't quantify, but I'm gonna give you a chance maybe to do that. So it looks like you started playing little golf with your dad when you were growing up. And hey, let's face it, it's probably not the first sport a child or a parent with a disability would think about sending a child with a disability to go play, much less a child that doesn't have hands, right? So just talk me through a little bit, if you will, about your upbringing, and because clearly you got taken to the golf course, you're still a golfer, so I'm curious about that, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, it's interesting when I look back. I mean, as you say, this is it's all down to my dad really, and a couple of members of extended family. My dad was a casual golfer, if you like, just played for enjoyment. We um, I have quite an influence from Ireland. So I was born in Northern Ireland. My mum and her seven siblings were from the Republic of Ireland. So we spent a lot of time in Ireland, and as you know, golf is massive over there. And I think actually one of the important things when I look back to how I started playing was that par three length courses or pitch and putts. I don't know if that's a term familiar in the States, but yeah. So, oh, of course it is. There is the drive, pitch and putt at Augusta, isn't there? So in Ireland, we would go on a family holiday. We'd of course spend time at a beach and in town, and then there'd be a pitch and putt. And so um, dad and my uncles would want to play, and I guess my dad would want to be able to take me along, so I would go. And um, what I do remember is I started off by doing some of his putts for him. So I wish I could tell you the exact story here, but of course, we're talking about childhood memories, and also at the time, of course, when you start to do something, you don't realize how big a part of your life it's going to become. But what I imagine happened was my dad probably sort of, gave me a putter. Can you hold this, son? Type thing, and I must have figured out a way to hold it and started doing some of his putts. And my joke at this point is that my dad was a terrible putter, so he was always probably quite happy to give me the putter and let me do his putts for him, even as a child. And then what I do remember more clearly is that as I showed kind of real interest in this, and at the same time was then watching golf on TV with my dad. We'd stay up late for the Masters, and we'd watch the Open Championship, and as I say, that's where I found some of these heroes in the commentators. So the two things were making it obvious I was keen on golf. And when I got to, let's say, 13, 14 years of age, my dad spoke to a guy, the club pro at um, a local golf club, and must have told him about me. And the next thing I know, I'm going in to meet this guy, and this guy has welded a couple of shafts together to give me my first 7-iron. So you can imagine this 7-iron is about uh, you know 60 inches long, something like that. Maybe slightly shorter when I was shorter, but these days it's about 60 inches long. So suddenly I've now got a putter. So he gave me one of the old broom handle putters, long putter anyway, made me a 7-iron. Now I can go to the pitch and putt with my dad and basically play. And that then progressed into the guy made me a 5-wood. So now I've got 3 clubs, and my dad would take me every Saturday morning for lessons. Lessons like just a group lesson with other kids, but the pro who'd made me my clubs, a amazing guy called Terry Gosden, would spend time with me working out how I was going to hold the club, how I was going to swing, blah 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 blah. And yeah, then obviously it snowballs into playing with my friends, playing with dad pretty regularly. Um, there was a flirtation with Titleist. I think we went for a visit to Titleist, and actually they then made me a proper one-piece shaft for my 5-wood. And so things were just progressing. One lovely thing that happened, because I should say, I suppose the sad aspect of this is that my dad actually died 3 years ago. So that had a big impact on me, and I owe him a lot in regards to not just my golf but the broadcasting. But before Dad died, we were able to go back and see this Terry Gosden again. So this is now, I think, maybe 10, 15 years had passed between us seeing each other, and it was great to see him, and he did me a whole new set of grips, and it was like basically when I was 14 again, but now I was 40 or whatever. He sort of went through all my clubs, upgraded them all again, and yeah, so now I am still in a position to play golf. I There are aspects of my swing that mean power is quite difficult, so distance off the tee is an issue. And I actually have a little boy now who's nearly 2 years old, and I have hardly played at all since he was born, just because of time. But as he gets older and as I get more time back again, I have a kind of bit of an idea to work with Ping on changing the way I swing the golf club and changing the way I hit the ball to give me a bit more power. Because obviously I would like to get to a point where I'm then playing golf with my son. He might hate it, in which case I'm not going to force it on him. But if he shows any interest in golf, then obviously I would love the idea of being able to go out golfing with him in a few years' time. So yeah, that's it. It'll come full circle then, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting about getting back to the pro, and it kind of you know proves what's really important in this whole concept of getting people into the game, right? Certainly, it always helps if your family or friends are pushing you that way, or drawing you in, or inviting you to play, whatever the term, including
Yeah,
you to that is what it is. You know, then part two of that is okay. Now, where's the golf person, the golf pro, or the facility that's going to help you like they would help any golfer get into golf clubs. And so when you get those two things together, then it kind of goes, okay, now it's back on Andy. Okay, he's got the clubs, he's got the place to do it. Does Andy want to play golf or not? But I can definitely appreciate you sharing that about your son, and sorry to hear about your father, of course. But I can see a time in the not too distant future, if it hasn't happened already, probably not quite, but when he gets a little more stable on his 2 feet, with big sticks in his hand and things like that, I can see a time where you might be letting your son do a little putting for you.
oh, absolutely, yeah, exactly. And this, that's and also, I mean, you touched on it earlier. Me, way before I was involved in the adaptive open coverage, I remember when I saw Andreas Brandenberger on social media, and it was amazing. I met him at Woodmont for the first time, and it was great to meet him. But for any person with a disability out there, whether you've been born with that disability or whether you've acquired it in an accident or illness or whatever's happened to you, to see people a bit like yourself um, playing golf, it's fascinating for me watching Andreas and Brandon Canesi, and there are one or two other people out there who would basically describe themselves as having either, no hands, short arms,
Mhm.
whatever. To see those guys and see how they play, and then see people with disabilities that are different but similar to me. This is how I've tried come up with this idea to try and work with Ping or whoever wants to help me. Is can I swing with just one arm? Because at the moment I hold the club sort of under one arm, up through my chin, shoulder on the other side. My head is essentially, connected to the club almost. It's certainly involved in my swing, which means I can only swing back to, let's say, 3 o'clock over here, swing but through to kind of 9 o'clock over there. If I was freed up, if my torso and my head were freed up and I am just swinging with my right arm attached to the club, obviously there'll be difficulties associated with that. But if I can get some whip on that club, I think I will get more power, more distance, potentially be just more comfortable playing. And those kind of ideas have only come from me watching other disabled golfers. And as I say, not necessarily even as a broadcaster, just as somebody finding these players on social media and going, "Wow." I'm sure you've seen, and I'm sure lots of people, following golf in the States have seen Juan Postigo, the Spanish player, who plays off one leg, and his swing is just pure. You would think somebody playing off one leg would be wobbling all over the place, shaking. He is rock solid, graceful swing, hits the ball a mile, lovely guy. It is those kind of people that when you see them, and I'm conscious of this when I'm doing the coverage, that there'll be people that viewers sat at home will see that will make them go, "Wow," and like literally, like I've just done there, sit back and go, "Hold on a minute." how's he or she doing that? And I think a large part of my role is getting that across because, as you say, there are players in the field who don't have that obvious disability that you can see. Even Kit Poper, who tore the tournament apart this summer, shot a 61 at Woodmont. Somebody just watching a clip of him hitting a shot on the Golf Channel won't see what's going on. They won't understand. And so my role really, when I'm speaking to Kit Poper or when I'm filming a feature with him, as I did this spring, is like, let's get it across what you're dealing with. And I think me having a disability myself does help me in that regard, because I think I can put people at ease, players at ease, that I'm not going to embarrass them or anything. I'm gonna I am gonna ask them about their disability. I am gonna ask them to explain how it affects their golf, and hopefully they understand that I'm not trying to be offensive or cheeky or, as I say, embarrass them in any way. I'm trying to get it across to the person at home to make the person at home go, wow, just as much about them as they will for, Andreas
Mm.
or Max, playing from his wheelchair, or any of the players who have that obvious visible disability. So I do think that is one of the things I bring to the coverage, which is I'm not frightened of asking the players things, but also I'm kind of conscious of, and I'm sensitive enough to maybe tee it up with them first. I'll often say to them off camera, by the way, are you happy if I ask about X, Y, or Z? Because if they're not happy, I won't ask. That's a red line. So yeah, it's been fascinating for me as a disabled golfer to see other disabled golfers. Definitely.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, that I definitely don't get paid for saying this, but Ping has been in this part of the game for a long time, and certainly the
Yeah.
other kind of getting involved and doing what they can. But uh, I'm uh, I'm pretty confident Brian Ward can get you in a club
Yeah,
and
I've met Brian. I think
did
in
it.
Pinehurst 2 years ago, I was ready to go. I was all up for experimenting, and then little boy happened. So yes, at some point I will get back together with Brian and we'll work something out.
Well, we're going to segue to some questions here about just briefly, and in some of the, obviously you've been written about and spoken to lots of folks about your career and what you do. And again, we really appreciate the opportunity. But we mentioned it earlier about the friends and family bringing you into the game, and the term inclusion. Access to the golf course is one thing, but being included is really what it's all about. Playing golf with your friends, family, whatever, being invited to do that. So being in versus looking in, wanting to be in, being invited into the game, whatever that may be. You know, perhaps you have an example in your life of, you know, being on the wrong side of inclusion or integration, I think is a term that I've seen in some of the writings where it kind of opens your eyes a little bit to what might potentially be a challenge for an individual with disability in life in general, much less getting in golf, that said, okay, this is something I'm going to have to work through. In essence, by default, unfortunately, too many folks with disabilities become educators in this space because they have to, unfortunately, help people understand that they were just people. You just want to play golf, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I mean, in everyday life, obviously there are occasional, access situations, if you like. I think the classic one, I guess, to a certain extent everywhere, but certainly in this country, would be public transport. Are there elevators places? Are there trains coming in on a level platform to step onto? Um, one thing I go on them, but I'm always a bit tense going on them is escalators. So not
Yeah.
elevators, but escalators, because I can't hold on.
Mm.
So that first sort of step on, and I get settled, and then I feel myself, like I stand there, kind of almost getting like rigid. I'm not. I don't want to be knocked by anybody. I'm not going to move a muscle until I get down. I don't know why I still go on them, to be honest. Well, in fact, I do. I suppose the reason is what we're talking about. Sometimes the things aren't in place to allow you to get around the things that you find difficult, or in that case, even scary. I think I think there always has to be a bit of give and take on these things. Something like the London Underground system is hundreds of years old. It's not an automatic thing that every single station is going to be accessible. I think as long as the direction of travel, if you excuse the pun, is heading in that way, that's enough. I think this about a lot of things actually, that in this kind of disability space, so much progress has been made, and I think it's important to celebrate that progress. I wouldn't I wouldn't want to come on and in any kind of interview or anything, and just sort of moan and complain about why isn't this happening, why is that still happening, blah 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 blah. Because I think it's important to acknowledge the progress and just say, but we need to carry on. We need to keep getting better. We potentially need to get better even quicker than we have done, but progress has been made. And on a golf front, I would like to think that things like the Adaptive Open and the Golf Channel coverage, things like the G4D Open and the coverage the R&A gives that in this country, I'm hoping that that's kind of bleeding down to just golf clubs everywhere, so that when a disabled person turns up and says, "Can I use a buggy?" or I don't know, can I go out and play 6 holes rather than 18? Um, and obviously not be charged for 18. Crucially, can I pay for 6 holes? Let's say, can I bring somebody with me who's actually not going to play golf, but they're going to walk around with me and put the tee down for me and pick the ball out of the hole, tend the flag. I hope that the answer to these questions is yes, and I hope that the coverage of the tournaments is actually sort of helping the answer be yes, if you know what I mean. Um, and the one big thing I suppose is I hope that kind of common sense is used in these situations, because golf, let's face it, is a sport riddled with rules
Right.
and standards and etiquette and things like that. Now, all of these things are crucial. Don't get me wrong, but I think in some cases they can hold the sport back when it comes to the world of accessibility. I think if a person, I mean, I'm thinking of maybe sort of silly examples here, but I think they illustrate the point. If a disabled person comes along and says, "Look, my disability or my condition means that I've got to wear shorts, or I've got to wear, I mean, I mean, this is the sort of Tyrrell Hatton, I've got to wear a hoodie, or I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Or
Right.
or I've got to take my buggy onto the tee or near the green or whatever." I would hope that common sense comes into play here, and the golf club goes, "Okay, yes," or if they really have to, "Yes, but can you play at this time?" If I came and said, "Look, I can't hit it particularly far off the tee, but I do want to play your golf course. I'm going to go around your golf course in 120 shots. Best case scenario, 120 shots." Um, and the golf club go, "Okay, but well, in that case, would you mind playing either at the start of the day or at the end of the day, so you're not holding other groups up?" I would like to think that everybody then just accepts that is the common sense answer and goes, "Okay, great, let's do that."
Yeah.
Or, if I came and said, "Can I play, can I play 6 holes, have a break, go out and play another 6 holes, have a break and play another 6 holes across a day or 2 days or whatever?" Again, I'd like to think that some solution can be got to. And I suppose I still am a bit concerned that at some of the stricter golf clubs about the place, it would be, "Oh no, no, you can't do that. That's against the rules." And obviously, you guys and lots of other organisations, your work is partly in this area to make golf clubs more accommodating to unusual requests, but they're requests being made for a very good reason.
Yeah, and of course we have the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there's kind of a law out there, public law courses
Yeah.
that drives a lot of the, at least the access piece of it. And y'all have, I believe, UK has a 2010 Equalities Act, which is probably similar sort of stuff. I'm not sure how close they are, but laws don't fix culture.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's kind of the space we're in as far as, okay, listen, here's the law. We're not the Department of Justice. We're trying to help you understand, how to comply with that, first of all, in a nice way, so the Department of Justice doesn't come knocking on your door,
Yeah.
is really kind of what we do. And then the second part of that is, okay, what are your policies and procedures operationally? How well is your staff trained to be, ready to accommodate, and the term be reasonable about what you're doing. Yeah, courses get very, very busy some days, and all days are not going to be perfect. You're gonna succeed and you're gonna fail sometimes to do what the right thing to do is, but if you're working hard to do the right thing more times than just saying we can't do that and not even giving it an effort, I think that's kind of where we get most of our phone calls and emails, quite honestly, from golfers. Okay, but also from golf courses who want to know what to do, who want
Yeah. Yeah.
to
And
develop.
and also, it shouldn't be down to a law, should it? Do you know what I mean? The law is there as the backstop, but actually, the golf clubs should be willing to help and compromise and do some of these things, just because they should. It's the right thing to do. They shouldn't be doing it, or in fact, I suppose the better way of putting it is they shouldn't not be doing it because there's sort of nothing in the law to say that they have to do X, Y, or Z. Do you know what I mean? They should be proactively trying to help disabled people get into golf or enjoy golf. That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, at least as far as our law goes over here, first of all, the law only applies to public accommodations. It technically, not even technically speaking, it doesn't apply to private golf facilities unless they kind of operate in a way that kind of makes them public, as a lot of Monday tournaments, a lot of weddings for outside folks. But it's not about the law. It's like, do you not have members at your private facility that are aging out a little bit that could,
Yeah,
if they
yeah,
get a little more access, they could play longer? Do they not bring guests? Maybe their guest has had a stroke, is a recent stroke victim, and wants to play golf and has to do some things differently now. And so we work a lot on that too. It's like, yeah, we talk about the law because of the physical law requirements to make ways to get into the building on the right side of the building instead of 300 yards away, whatever that may be, escalators versus stairs, the things you're talking about. And I do think most golf courses are doing better than they think. We've got some tools to help them kind of figure out what they need to do. So I'm with you on that. I mean, and generally speaking, over in the UK, you've certainly got a sample over here with the competitions and tournaments. You know, I suspect they're just the same kind of challenges over there as us. Is you got a lot of clubs that get it right, and some clubs are still probably just like, for whatever reason, just looking the other way or not really investing in what's coming their way, quite honestly.
yeah. No, I'd agree with that, to be honest. Which is, as you touched on there, is ironic because every golf club in the world will have a significant proportion of their members will be at the older end of the spectrum, and so naturally you are going to be, you're going to be catering to a lot of people who will develop disabilities in different ways. And disability is something that can just hit you, bang. We've seen that from so many of the players at the Adaptive Open. You can become disabled instantly, and you go from non-disabled golfer to disabled golfer. And what is your golf club going to do to enable you to carry on playing?
Yeah, very, very true. And I think, yeah, you just hit the nail on the head on that, because I mean, none of us know what's going on the next day, and just the sheer wide range of athletes and demographics that you see in Adaptive Open, whether it's a 16-year-old uh, man or woman, girl or boy, a junior golfer, or a 75 or 77-year-old, adult out there, or older, that's been in that
Yeah.
event. So 100%. So I've been really lucky to be able to, travel the Adaptive Opens. USGA is very, very kind to us. So, and I go there as a spectator, and we certainly do a little networking, but it's really just, I really enjoy watching that golf almost, more than being, I love PGA stuff, but as opposed to being a PGA Tour vendor, just the access and just what's going on. And again, to your point, uh, just watching some really, really good golf being played. I mean, and then also, there's some other golf, at every tournament where folks aren't having their best games, but just to watch just the continued drive, even when those individuals might not be having their best day, it's just a uniquely different, I think, environment and feeling out there right now as far as esprit de corps and rooting for everyone kind of a thing to a certain extent. But listen, they still want to win. They still want to, you know, beat the other person they're playing with. I mean, it's golf; they're keeping score. But I tell you what, it's an amazing group of folks. And in your travels around the world, and in sport in general, observing adaptive golf competitions, high level, G4D Open stuff, U.S. Adaptive Opens, things of that nature. You know, uh, is anything different? Does anything different stand out about the way these events are running? Or are they pretty much similar, just locked on? People have different accents. I mean, kind of what are they kind of all kind of in the same? But obviously, I think Europe has a little bit more commitment right now into I think some of the I don't want to say higher end, but maybe some purses and some of these things with some of these athletes. Because again, it takes a lot of really skilled golfers, regardless of ability, to have a professional event. You got to have a field of a lot of golfers. I'm not sure if we're there yet, here totally. You can certainly have a field, but it's not going to be a big one because that's what brings in money to have these events. And again, I'm all about bringing new golfers into the game as far as what we do, but these events are great for marketing and showing what people's possible. So they're important. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Where do you think these tournaments are getting it right, where they might be getting it wrong, or what they're doing great?
Well, so the one big headache I'd say for disabled golf is in a similar way to lots of other disabled sports or Paralympic sports in some cases is the classification system. Because clearly, when you are bringing together lots of people with different disabilities, you've got to have some way of grouping them. And so the way that is done currently is by splitting the players up into impairment groups and having a winner of each of the groups, which obviously keeps the interest down the field. Um, you don't want the classification system to get in the way of the action, though. You don't want it to get in the way of people's enjoyment at home. I think you know there is a struggle, if you like, between gross scoring and say net scoring. I
Mhm.
think I'm right in saying there is a G4D event happening this week at the British Masters that is a net tournament, and it will be interesting to see um, the outcome of that because I won't pick out individual players because it will sound as though I'm being unfair to them. But clearly, within a field of 90 players with different disabilities, there are going to be players whose impairment has affected their body less than others, has affected their golf swing less than others. They are still absolutely overcoming challenges. Don't get me wrong, but they can hit the ball further, possibly straighter. It might be that the mental side of their game is tougher because, as in, you know, tougher in a positive sense because they've got less going on, they've got less to deal with. So clearly, those players are going to stretch out at the top of the leaderboard, and um, what might happen over a period of time is you get the same kind of players in the top 10 of the leaderboard all the time.
Yeah,
Fair play to those top 10, by the way. I'm not criticizing them in any way.
that's good.
But on the flip side, so that's in gross, of course. That's in gross scoring. Same way you would have in, just when you look at a PGA Tour leaderboard, the person at the top has been the best player that week.
Mhm.
And in a way, that's how it should be. That's how it should be in golf. The flip side of that is if you switch to a net scoring system, you may give a more severely impaired player a chance of winning the tournament, but they might be winning the tournament at something like 25 over par gross.
Right.
And how does that then look? And how do we then communicate that if we're broadcasting the championship on the Golf Channel, for example?
Yeah.
It's really difficult, and I'm not sat here pretending to know the answer. I mean, we can we can check this back, one of us, but I'm pretty sure Kip won at Woodmont. Did he end up something like 14 under, or maybe even higher? I think it might, well, lower. I think it might have been an even better score. So when somebody rocks up to the golf channel and sees that, they go, "My God!" Like, let's say 14 under par. I can't remember if it was or not, but 14 under par for 3 rounds at Woodmont, amazing. When Max, and again, I would probably need to check the score for you, but when Max went round Pinehurst, I think Max Tongisala, went round Pinehurst in 69. It was the lowest score by a seated player ever at the Adaptive Open, and I think he beat it, didn't he, at Woodmont this year? But 69 round Pinehurst, number 6. Wow, people go, that's incredible. People at home who might have played Pinehurst number 6 and gone round in 80 will go, my God, that lad who's playing from a wheelchair has just gone round in 69. I've got 2 arms, 2 legs. I went round in 80.
Right.
So you can see straight away where the growth system really does just, define how good these players are. But you could make an argument that the net scoring system gives more players a chance. But then does it make it feel less elite? So there's a real struggle there. And then the thing that is the elephant in the room, if you like, is the Paralympics. Interestingly, as much as I love golf, I'm not sure golf should be in the Olympics, although they are making changes, which I do think golf in the Olympics in LA will be better, because I think they're moving to a mixed sport and a team element and blah, blah, blah. So I think, okay, fine, it warrants its place there. So golf's in the Olympics, golf should be in the Paralympics. But the Paralympics, and I'm heavily involved in the Paralympics. I've worked for the International Paralympic Committee, and then I've worked for NBC as a broadcaster on the Paralympics. So I know my Paralympics, and I know what's kind of involved in getting a sport into the Paralympic Games. The Paralympic Games want to be able to give a gold medal to the best player with one arm, the best seated player, the best blind player. They don't, as far as I'm aware, I don't think the Paralympics wants an overall tournament champion. They want to put players out in their impairment groups. And as far as I can tell, certainly on the European side of things, the golf organisations have said, "Oh no, we feel a bit uneasy about that. We do split the players up into their impairment groups, but we do still want an overall champion." So there's this kind of tussle, and obviously, the golf handicap system is meant to sort of even out all these,
Right.
inequalities, if you like. So it is a headache. It is a headache. And as I say, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I think perhaps the answer is what I think the G4D are trying to do at the moment is have a mix of gross and net events, and a team event, and a blah, 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 and a match play event maybe down the road, and just sort of mixing it up. But I do think the G4D Open, which has been at Woburn and is moving somewhere equally special, I believe, next year, and the US Adaptive Open, I think they have to remain as they are, which is a gross scoring contest for one overall men's champion, one overall women's champion, and then your individual category winners. I think that's kind of the only way for those 2 prestige tournaments. But in other tournaments, I do think there's room for a bit of experimentation, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. And when you take a player, and I had to look up the results to confirm again. But yeah, 24 under for
Oh,
24.
24 under. God, I missed.
Oh yeah, no, I knew it was because I remember I was there day one, and I
Yeah,
I saw him approaching number 9, and it was for his ninth hole, and I was like, okay, this is legit 59 watch.
yeah, yeah.
I busted over the other side of the course, and I pretty much watched his last 7 or 8 holes. He really, he kind of had it. There was a little minor bobble with a few holes to go, but it was phenomenal. But I agree with you completely. And this the key events, it is the best of the best from a growth standpoint, because that is in the end that kind of golf thing. But I agree with you. Looking for ways to have a couple, premier mixed events is a good solution. Everybody still gets their bragging rights. And here's the bottom line, because clubs do that all the time. They have gross and net, because that's how you keep everybody happy. Kind of a deal at the club. Most of the conversations about scoring issues or concerns occur in the net division.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
all goes up. Yeah, really, really valid for that. So, and even talking about prize money, we'll kind of gloss over this briefly. Even talking about, prize, because there's certainly a group of golfers out there on both sides in the world that can play at a high level. Certainly whoop up on any club pro on the planet that might be one of the better club pro players out there. PGA Tour, different thing right now. Not to say it's not impossible, but there's certainly, some scoring capability from the length of course and things like that. But I guess prize money is a thing too. I'm not sure if a lot of folks in the community of golfers with disabilities, kind of understand. And it's one thing to say take the money, but once you start taking money, you're not an amateur anymore. And the reality is, if you want to have an amateur playing career, which is where more of these tournaments are going to be for the foreseeable future, at least in more scale, it's something you got to think about. And there's lots of ways to take money. Actually, with nil and some things now, there NIL, you can get paid now as an amateur much more than you used to could. But I think it's still something to be aware of for these golfers that it's expensive to play in golf tournaments. It's expensive to travel. It's more expensive for some athletes with disabilities than others because of the logistics required for what devices they may need to use to play golf, whether it's a vehicle. But the reality is, it's a different game when you start playing for money as a profession.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the again, I think there's another divide between the players who have sponsorship deals, and that enables them to, um, they're not playing tournaments for prize money, but their sponsorship deals enable them to be a full-time golfer, and time in the gym, time on the range, time playing golf around the world, and then at the US Adaptive and the G4D, they're coming up against players who have full time full time jobs and can't dedicate their lives to golf in the same way, and haven't got the very best physical training regimes and all of this sort of stuff, because those kind of things cost money. So there is a divide there, and I would certainly want you know the disabled golfers or the disabled golfing community to access sponsorship and prize money. Prize money can obviously be done in lots of different ways. I suppose I would want the players to be able to access funding. I mean, this was one of the interesting things. And again, look, I have no relationship with Deloitte as such. I interviewed um, their guy at Woodmont, their marketing manager, and I think what they did was amazing for this year's US Adaptive Open, covering the transport costs or contributing to the transport costs of the players, and stumping up a bit of cash to enable us to do live coverage of the final round. They were two brilliant steps in the right direction, and hopefully it can continue at the US Adaptive. I would love a company, whether it would be Deloitte or somebody else, to be able to do something similar for the G4D, because what I would love to see is more American players coming to the G4D Open, and then I feel that me personally, but others, the RNA and people involved in the G4D Open, Edgar as well, could say to the Golf Channel, okay, well, how about doing hits with Andy from the G4D Open, for example? I'm there anyway. I'm working for the RNA. There's TV cameras there. Um, Let me do the same job I do at the US Adaptive at the G4D. I think, in a way, quite reasonably, Golf Channel might go, well, we kind of need a few more American players in the field in order to do that. I don't know. I'm sort of just, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but that's kind of how I sense it might go. So then this intermediary company in the middle, like Deloitte, who go to American players, hey, if you're good enough to qualify for the D4D Open, we'll cover your transport costs. Then suddenly, to use an American expression, we've got a ball game then, haven't we? We've got
Right.
Then you've got a truly international field at the G4D. Don't get me wrong, one or two American players come over for it. I think Jarrett Fultz played at it. Chris Willis from Canada's come over a couple of times, but at the moment they're kind of funding their own way. And I think all of that should be opened up, if possible, by some kind of sponsorship. So, let's see what happens with that next spring. But I think funding of some kind, whether it's prize money, sponsorship, travel costs being covered, is we're getting to the point now where that kind of thing is required because the standard is so good.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that. I love that idea of some of these events being, certainly not only did you win, but it also, got you into this particular field that is
Yeah,
maybe so more because, listen, I have to think about funding when I play in golf tournaments every now and then. Just a few here and there. He's like, okay, do I really want to stay at a hotel for 2 nights? Because my goal is to, if I'm lucky, cover my entry fee, which is not big. And
yeah,
and that doesn't happen as often as need to. But I know you've got time constraints here. Just got a couple more quick questions for you here. I know you've got to go. You got to go. I believe call a match this afternoon or somewhere. I believe, right?
yeah. I've got a match tonight. It's not a very glamorous match, but it'll make you laugh. It's you can look it up. It's Luton Town
Okay.
against Wigan Athletic. Luton
Okay.
Town is kind of northwest of London. It's a proper old-fashioned ground stadium, and yeah, I'm doing reports on it for radio tonight. Yeah.
What level are they in?
So they are in what are we talking now? So there's Premier League, there is Championship below that, and then there is League One, and we're in League One, so third tier. But Luton Town were Premier League 2 years ago. They've gone
Very good.
down and down again in 2 seasons.
Crazy. That's an amazing part about the Premier League is if you don't keep up the standard, you got to go down and work on it again. Well, again, competitions are great, but we like to keep the pedal down on bringing more golfers, and again, having more golfers to me, I think, is these will grow the game initiatives, whatever they may be. But in the end, I think there's a real opportunity. Without stating the obvious, I'll state the obvious. That with bringing more kids into adaptive golf, there are some challenges with that because adaptive golf cars are kind of big right now. They're adult size, and so unless you kind of are a good sized teenager, if you have a lower body impairment, it's going to be difficult for you to use one of those vehicles. And one of them may be looking at a solution for that, but I think that's where the real emphasis with a lot of our work is certainly with every demographic, but certainly with kids. I think there's a real opportunity there where leading golf associations can really you work to share what's possible, imagery, marketing, whatever, get more kids where kids can see kids that might have a prosthetic leg or prosthetic arm. They're out there. I mean, it's not like it doesn't happen, but I think it needs to really scale up a little bit to kind of just show what's possible. And I think ultimately that's going to feed into a much broader pool of golfers who can, just drive the sport in this particular group even further than it is. So as we talked about at the beginning, this interview with you is kind of the peak of my interview career so far. So it's probably hoping having to embarrass myself in front of a true pro here today. And as you can see, I've said this before, I definitely have a face for radio. But uh, you know, little shift gears as we wind it down here, and some really great points on the adaptive golf, and some points that I hadn't thought about today. So I really appreciate you bringing those up and addressing those because they're spot on. So, if someone is interested in broadcasting as a career, all right, what personal traits are advantages in a career in radio and or television?
I suppose being realistic, you probably do have to be interested in writing for a start, because people might look at me and go, "Well, you're on the radio, you're talking," but of course I'm writing what I'm talking, not necessarily word for word. In some cases, word for word, but other cases maybe just bullet points. Or you have to you have to be good with words, whether written or spoken. I think that's the thing. I think my key advice would be to watch and listen to and read as much sports media as you can, and identify the people that you like watching and reading and listening to, and not try to copy them, but work out what it is that you like about them, and then sort of try and bring it into your own style, if you like. You have to be yourself. I mean, you really, really have to be yourself. You can't just go on and pretend to be Jim Nance, for example. But what is it
Right.
that Jim Nance does? For example, it might be that the thing you like about Jim Nance is he knows when to not talk. I think this is one of the big things. You see it at the Masters a lot. you see the clip of the winning putt and he doesn't speak for several seconds. He knows when not to talk. That is the thing maybe you take from Jim Nantz and go, okay, I'm going to remember not to do that. And so, you just take from lots of different people, you add a bit of your own style or personality in, and then, you know, you're in good shape. So I think an interest and talent for writing, and and an interest in kind of how other people are doing it. They're the two main things. And just get out to your local sports team if you can. Can I interview a couple of the players? Can I put it out there on social media? Can I film an interview and put it on YouTube? These are the ways to kind of start off, just yourself, without even needing to be given a job. You can kind of do it yourself to begin with.
Yeah, very, very cool. So what's really the last question here, and then we'll do some rapid fires, and I'll cut you loose to go get ready for your um, you know, what's really have you found is the most rewarding part of your career, to this? I know it's a hard answer because there's probably many, many things that you've done that are rewarding, but kind of at the core of what, kind of keeps you motivated and fired up to do what you do, what brings you back?
um, well, I think it's obviously a great privilege to be going to some of the places I do. I really, really look forward to my trip to the States every year now. And actually had a couple of trips to the States this time around because I came out and filmed features with a couple of players. So, the excitement of just being in different places and seeing sports events that, other people would, kill to be at, and I'm at some of them, and I've still got a big long list of sports events I've not been to, and I'm desperate to get some of those. Um, and I suppose increasingly now the feeling that, again, not me personally necessarily, but kind of we collectively involved in something like the Adaptive Open, for example, are beginning to make a difference. The coverage is increasing year on year. The awareness of adaptive golf around the world is increasing. And as I say, that's not down to me personally, but it's down to the thing I'm involved in, and a whole wide range of people working towards it. So, that feeling, that does make me feel proud. I think when I look back at 12-year-old me doing my dad's putting for him at a pitch and putt, and now, here I am, however many years later, 30 years, 32 years later, I'm presenting, disabled golf tournaments in different places around the world. It's yeah, I'm guilty. I don't know if you're like this, Dave, but I'm guilty of sort of one thing ends and I'm then immediately on to, right, okay, what are we doing next week? Or not in a kind of, absolutely not in a kind of not caring way, just in a kind of, right, I've got to make sure I do a good job at the next thing I do, or the next thing I do. What's next? And I don't give myself enough time. Interviews like this are actually an opportunity to sit and reflect and go, okay, actually, yeah, I should take a minute to sort of just digest that I've done 3 adaptive opens now, and hopefully do many more. And as I say, we're making a bit of a difference. So yeah, it's the exciting travel, the great people I get to meet, and the great things I get to see, and then obviously the feeling of making a difference, all combined to make it an exciting job, no doubt.
Well, you're definitely, making a difference with, what you bring to the table, in all the sports you cover, certainly. Just it's just a powerful message. I mean, you're a phenomenal broadcaster and announcer, and that's kind of where the conversation stops. It's not because of anything except that you are really good at what you do, and so what you bring to Adaptive Open is just it makes it very, very, very good TV. So I'm going to wrap it up with a couple of rapid fire questions. Just have a little fun here, wind it down, and uh, you can say yes, no, or you can say no comment if you want to. There might be a couple no comments on here because in your world, I know showing favoritism on camera is not a good thing. But remember, it's just audio today, so it's no video. So,
Yeah.
all right. So,
Problem.
who wins the Ryder Cup and by what score at Bethpage?
Europe by 2, and that's if I yeah, Europe by 2 if Keegan Bradley tries. No, what am I trying to say here? If Keegan Bradley just is captain, doesn't play, Europe win by 2. If Keegan Bradley tries to play and be captain, Europe wins by 4.
Okay, I see where you're going there. I see you've bought into Roy McIlroy's explanation and gamesmanship about the challenge of that. I'm inclined to agree with you that it's not a good idea to try to do both. I was surprised with the pick, although I'm not in that game. I love Keegan Bradley. He's a fiery competitor. You need him hitting golf balls if he qualifies. I
Yeah,
mean, that's the deal, or should get picked because he's hot enough to get picked. All right, very true. So it's you and a partner have to play Justin Rose and Roy McIlroy. All right. And I'm before I ask this question, I want to I'm really liking Justin Rose at the Masters next year. I'm telling you what, I'm not a
yeah.
gambler by design, but that's one I might look at ahead of time. But if you and a partner had to play Justin Rose and Roy, who would you choose as your partner and why?
I think the only chance you've got of beating those two is if I was paired with Scheffler. I think from a social point of view, if I just wanted to go and have a good match with those two guys, I suppose I would pick Tommy Fleetwood, and then that would be a brilliant foursome.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tommy Fleetwood's. I mean, the last two tournaments I've watched, I was watching to want him. I wanted him to win so
Yeah.
badly.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I know he's going to get there. It's just, man, it's heartbreaking sometimes, but man, what a guy, what an attitude. He talks about it when he's done. And, you know what? It's just, he has that every man feel about him, every person feel about him as far as golfers. We just all go through that. It's just, unfortunately, he's going through it in front of millions of people. And, it's just, it's a different game. So, well, I don't want to say this might be a no comment in your line of work, but I was going to look. I don't see anything in the background there, but what football team jersey is hanging in your closet? This the one you would wear the most?
Yeah, no, so I have no problem saying historically I am a Liverpool supporter. I was born in Northern Ireland, and the proximity of Liverpool to Belfast meant that my mum worked with somebody I think who just gave me loads of Liverpool memorabilia when I was a toddler, so it kind of stuck. So I am a Liverpool fan, but in all seriousness, because of the work I do, my partisan sort of nature for one team has diluted because I'm having to be impartial about watching a whole bunch of other teams. So I am a Liverpool fan, but it doesn't affect what I do on air. My younger sister, is way more fanatical about Liverpool than I am. She picked it up from me, and now she's the one telling me about signings and injuries and everything. So yeah, and my second team would be Coventry City in the Midlands. They were my dad's team, so they're the kind of second team I look out for their results.
Excellent. And one last question: how about a little quick, maybe a quick plug for your favorite golf course around where you live or where you like to play?
So, well, it's a very specific one. There is an incredible par three course. It's about an hour away from me. It's called Ampfield. It's AMP and then Field, Ampfield, and I think it was designed way back when by Henry Cotton.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful. It's 18 holes. Yeah, longest hole maybe 140 yards, something like that. It's kept in really good condition, and it was a course I found just before COVID lockdown, actually, funnily enough. And it's just perfect for me. I can go there and play my mates, and it's that beautiful leveler that golf offers because they might hit it on the green from the tee. I might take two to get it on the green, but then my short game is pretty good. I've got no wobbly wrists or elbows, so my short game is good, and we can score pretty level, and it's a great game, and you can have a little drink afterwards on the terrace. So yeah, Ampfield. I think it's just called Ampfield Golf Club, something like that, down in Hampshire, not far from Southampton, actually.
That's fantastic. I can't deny I actually kind of like the 19th hole as well here and there, after a round. But well, listen, Andy, it's been a real pleasure getting to know you a little bit better. I know I caught you kind of off guard. You were very busy at Woodmont, and when I cornered you and said I'm going to give you a call to do this, and you've been fantastic and receptive to doing this, and it was really informative what you brought up, and we really appreciate it. It was a real privilege to talk to you today. Any other last comments before we go for our audience?
No, no. I mean, just again, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to somebody so interested in golf and adaptive golf in particular. So I'm glad we bumped into each other, and hopefully you'll be there again next year, and I'll see you at Woodmont again.
We're gonna have to play some golf here in Charleston, South Carolina. There might be some good golf courses around here. But well, listen, have a great rest of the week, and I look forward to crossing your path in the future. And take care, and looking forward to catching you on TV and radio soon.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Dave.